Michael in New
Mhm.
York has what I think is an interesting take, which is that religion is still useful today. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
We're all right.
So, all right, so religion is still useful today, not in the sense of like fundamentalists, obviously. So, like you were
Oh,
saying, like the caller with the last one, like they taking that shit like way too literally, like with her, like before.
sure.
Why is it obvious
So,
that
but
fundamentalism is? Maybe you'll explain why it's obvious that
so
fundamentalism is
I,
different
so,
flavor.
I, so obviously, the thinking is too rigid. So everything has to be attached to something else. Like there's no mix and matching anything. Like
So,
everything is the
so
way it was taught. It can't change. And obviously, when they see someone change, like their daughter, it goes crazy. I'm going through the same thing like with my family, but kind of like the opposite way.
I'm
So
wondering.
my family was like, yeah,
So let me try and kind of narrow us in on the topics that are going to be most useful for the show. When you say religion is
sure.
still useful today, um, does that have anything to do with whether or not it's true? Because something can be false and useful.
Mm-hmm. So no, it has nothing to do with whether or not it's true.
Okay. In that case, Michael, I
So
mean, I know you've been on
mm,
hold for nearly an hour, so I want to make sure that you get to make your case. But I don't really care if religion is useful. I care whether or not it's true.
okay, so so I'm not making the case for people to adopt it. I'm making the case that it shouldn't be something we try to tear down.
Oh, okay. In
Like,
that case, I'm absolutely in disagreement because
Yeah, me
I think
too.
we should tear down any belief that isn't true.
all right, actually, I agree with that. But when I say tear down, I don't mean like tear it down like and try to like destroy it because that's not gonna go well. People are gonna see aggression and then go against that. People like will confuse like something good that's aggressive with something that's bad just because they
So
see
you're
like
arguing
aggression towards
tactics.
like something.
You're merely
Yeah,
arguing tone and tactics.
yeah, mostly in order to like yeah
What if
try
what if you're
to.
just sitting here? What if you're just sitting here letting people
Mm,
call in, asking them to demonstrate the
mm.
truth of their religion, and they keep failing? Is that pushing too hard?
Nah, nah, I actually really like what this show does with that. But
Okay.
um, they keep. So is it better to have people keep coming back to try to figure it out on their own, or like maybe like try to push them towards like talking their own words in a little bit?
I'm not sure I followed the question.
So so when like you reject the caller's claims, they're not hearing what you're saying. Obviously, like that's why they keep saying it over and over, and you're like, just answer the fucking question. They literally don't hear the question you're asking.
Yeah, but the issue here is that I'm not necessarily doing it for their benefit. I'm doing it for the people who are listening who agree with me.
Mm,
Who was me,
okay,
who was listening to
okay.
calls and became who was like just a few years ago. I thought dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark, and thanks to
Oh
people
shit.
like Matt, I was able
Mm,
to I was able to hear my most capable defenders, people who agreed with me,
mm,
and I was able to hear people like Matt poke holes in them. And because I was listening, it wasn't quite as personal. And then I was actually able to internalize that and say, "Oh, shoot, that's like a good point," because it wasn't my neck. I wasn't the one being embarrassed, right? So these are absolutely
mm,
things that need to be you as someone who deconverted, you absolutely I needed everything. I needed George Carlin mocking me, and I needed other people who were recently deconverted who are giving me a very soft sell, right? Like you can't there's no one size fits all here. So if you're calling in to say that one tactic or another tactic is in your view shouldn't be used, I'm here to say, well, that's short-sighted.
No, yeah. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, yeah, I like the idea of like using like a bunch of different ways. And yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And
Word.
to your question, you said that religion is useful. Is there something that religion does that we couldn't also accomplish without it?
No, nothing. But the problem, but like with the last caller, there's people who are just like, it's just like they're just too set, and there's always going to be someone who like isn't set who's going to become set because we have to share the same space.
I can assure you that
And
I was more set than any caller I've ever received. You know, so
You were more what?
I refuse to accept the narrative that there are specific people that cannot be persuaded otherwise, because it's all because I just put myself as the example. I just cannot. I've yet to come across anyone who is as set as I was.
I
So
think there's an aspect to what you talked about with comedy where I'm wondering, for people who are former believers who are now not, I love comedy. Tons of it. But I don't remember the first time I laughed at a joke that mocked my religion, but I know there was a moment. I know there was a moment while I was still a believer and I heard a joke that mocked something I believed. And instead of being offended or troubled by it, I laughed. And then I went, I don't remember what the joke is. I'm sure it happened several different times, but it's like, oh, I shouldn't be laughing at that. But that gets in your head and it becomes, hang on, is what I'm saying, is what I believe truly ridiculous enough that we can joke about it, in some kind of cartoon demonstration? And I don't just mean like uh, a trick question where you're like, oh, how many animals did Moses take on the ark? And then everybody laughs. Ha ha ha! That wasn't Moses. That was Noah. That's not a joke. I mean, and not the jokes that
I
are
didn't
consistent with
even peep.
religion. They're not the jokes that are consistent with religion, like a Christian, a Jew, and an atheist wind up at the pearly gates and they're standing in front of St. Peter and blah 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 blah. Those jokes never resonated with me because I didn't buy into this notion that there was a St. Peter at the pearly gates. It's all like Catholic, doctrine and mythology and all that. But there comes a point where you're going to hear the first joke, whether it's Jimmy Carr or somebody else who doesn't hold back but kind of takes pot shots at a religion that are strong. And as a matter of fact, Jimmy Carr had a joke that was like, oh, when I was a kid, and I shouldn't do the accent, but when I was a kid, I had this invisible friend and he was constantly looking out for me. And, I would talk to him every night. And then I grew up and I gave up religion. And that's a sort of joke that when I heard it, granted, I was already an atheist by the time I got around to listening to Jimmy Carr, but when I heard jokes like that, it would be like, ooh, that's funny, but I shouldn't laugh like that, because to laugh is to somewhere subconsciously acknowledge that you believe bullshit, or that what you believe is rightfully mocked by people who don't share those beliefs. And whether you want to write that off as, well, God has revealed himself to me in a way that I can be confident, and someday God will do that for those other people, and I have nothing but empathy and pity for them until such time as God brings them into the fold. You can do that, but at the end of the day, you still laughed at the joke.
Yeah.
did you have any other thoughts, Michael, that we didn't get to?
Nah, that's good. Yeah, there's a lot of other callers.
Sweet. Well, if you want to
Thank
call
you.
in sometime to tell us why religion is true and not just useful, I'm happy to talk about that another time too. Although let's do it not next to the road where I can hear the cars driving by.
Nah, yeah, I gotta be out the house. My house is like really loud.
I got you. Take care, Michael. Appreciate the call.